We are still a startup pack, but we've banded together with citizens here on the ground, and we're trying to affect school closures, masks, vaccinations, CRT, grooming, school board issues, and other hotbeds that have made their way to our door and your door. As we prepare for 2023, Pushback Idaho is going to begin to stretch ourselves further into the legislative process here in Idaho. We're pushing for expanded education freedom, also known as school choice. Inappropriate materials in our libraries will be dealt with, and we're trying to effect a change, many changes actually, with our local school board. We have elections coming up, et cetera, et cetera. But we cannot do any of this without first exploring a course correction in our own Idaho GOP. Over the last decade, Idaho voters have faithfully and respectfully pulled the lever for candidates who title themselves as Republicans, but who in practice are revealed to be Democrats. This is the extreme end of the behaviors, maybe. We don't know. Dorothy, our guest tonight, will have a lot more to tell us on that. But the street name for these legislators and candidates who register as Republicans is Republican in name only. And the acronym for that is RHINO. And they do it just to get voted into our well-known red state. And the terms have been around since 1865 to describe governments at the time that claimed to be representative, but were actually very autocratic. Is this sounding familiar yet? It's still considered a slur to this day, but it gets uglier. Rhinos have known for years traditional and conservative voters go to the polls ready to simply vote Republican. Many are uninformed because, of course, Republicans will win. It's Idaho. They always win. So, on that note, we would like to begin to address some of the issues that are attending this kind of mischief. And at this point, we've reached a threshold. It cannot be assumed that Idaho is going to remain red. And we know this because we have voting data. And there's been a welcome and astonishing increase of grassroots conservative organizations across Idaho, post-COVID and Biden's election, that are using technology software to analyze our legislators' voting records and even our own voting records of each Idahoan to create fast pictures of exactly where the problems are. So at this time, I want to introduce Dorothy Moon. She's on the ready. And Dorothy is the new chair of our GOP. And she is here tonight for approximately 1 hour to answer a few questions, talk about her big plans and what we can expect from our new Idaho GOP. And then we're going to have a question and answer session. But Dorothy ran for Secretary of State. She lost her primary. Many people are actually thrilled about that because they feel that she's now in her best capacity working towards keeping our state conservative and red. And it hasn't been easy on her, not one iota. And there's still treachery afoot. And we're just going to call it what it is. So Dorothy, let's start with you and with what went on in July at the convention.
Well, it was exciting. What happened at the convention? There are about 750 delegates who show up, and this includes all of the people who had just been voted in during the primary to represent their precincts. So we get to Twin Falls, and they show up, and I'm working a war room in my son's apartment to make sure I'm calling people to ask for their support to help me get in as chairwoman for the Idaho GOP. The venue was at the College of Southern Idaho. So one issue that already happened, which was unfortunate, a lot of Republicans are carrying weapons or guns. And so the event did not start off too well by the fact that people do concealed carry or open carry weren't allowed to do so. Especially in a conservative Republican state, the fact that we cannot adhere to our Second Amendment rights was a little bit of pushback. There's some pushback from some of the folks there. But at the end of the couple of days that we were all there and working really hard and talking to the folks, I had a pretty good sweep of 125-point spread. I had about 65% of the votes to actually become chairwoman of the party. What's unique about that is the previous election, there were only 12 votes between the two gentlemen who ran, Mark Fuller, who is now our second vice chair in the current executive committee, and Tom Luna. So Tom Luna prevailed. And even 2 years before that, it was Raul Labrador who took on, it was at the time, Luna, and he won by 2 votes. So the races have always been very close. What you have is newer folks coming in from California, the refugees who have seen what happened to their state, and they're wanting to really get involved to make sure their new home state does not become from the state they left. And we have people who are very, very strong as far as not bringing in woke corporatism, not taking away our freedoms, not taking federal money to impact and influence issues here in the state. And then we have the old guard who want to keep control of the way things have always been. And we're talking about our 5th and 4th generation Idahoans who do have a hard time with folks moving into the state. And I believe everybody who moves here just loves the state. And again, they want to keep it. So these were the people who came out for me. That 125-point spread were the Californians, or the ones from Oregon and Washington who have moved into the state.
Can you define for us, walking into the convention, you were surrounded by what is often considered the establishment Republicans, and certainly some rhinos. And we'll talk about the drama later because it was very high drama. And so let's talk about, for our listeners, what is a rhino here in Idaho? Who are they may be a sensitive issue, but what constitutes a rhino? What makes them a rhino? And why can't they just come over to the other side and behave?
Well, I agree. And the issue with what we define as a rhino, or at least how I see it, Republican in name only. And in order to win in this state for any legislative or executive position, it really helps a lot to be a Republican. And so there are folks who have very, I guess I'd say, Democrat philosophies, and they do put an R behind their name. And in the first year that they run, of course, no one has a record. As soon as you get a voting record, then the stripes are revealed. So we have many in the legislature. We have some people in the executive branch that once you look at their voting record and it is comparable to that of our Democrat counterparts, then you kind of wonder how in the world they actually got in that position in the first place. And as you try to expose some of these legislators who are not upholding our Republican platform, who are not adhering to our Idaho Constitution, when you start exposing them, they will go out on the stump and say they're the most conservative candidate that's ever represented a particular district, and nothing could be further from the truth. The sad thing is, a lot of folks don't do their due diligence and check out their candidates. It's, name recognition. It's the fact they've had longevity in the legislature or in the executive branch. And it is unfortunate. We don't have a more educated populace. We look at our schools, and I know that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit. I mean, government class is not a high item. It's everything else. The Constitution Day by legislation is supposed to be recognized every September 17th, and it's not. By law, you're supposed to be recognizing that. So it's really sad that what makes us good citizens, what makes us American, is the right to vote, to be intelligent on your choices, and make sure you understand all of the issues. And sadly, that isn't the case.
Do you think that there is a method that the uninformed voter should be using to inform themselves? What beyond reading the paper or the very disparate ways that we all receive our information now, it's very difficult, I think, to keep up. And so I'm going to go back to you as a go forward. Will your team, this new team that we're all counting on, will they create a system for all Idaho voters who are either registered Republican or simply want more information to tap into, to learn about candidates, a centralized place that they can go to? Because it's not happening in the counties necessarily. Some do it better than others, of course. And other central committees, for those who are informed, there is a hierarchical structure to Dorothy's new organization. It's a little bit complex, but in order to demystify that, will there be a central place, for example, at the next election, that we can direct our Idaho Republicans to go to be better informed?
Yes, and we're still working on that structure. Now, currently we have the Idaho Freedom Foundation that does an excellent job about ranking bills and then putting together more or less an informational run through session, how they voted on these bills. So like with me, on conservative issues, I was up at about 97%. I didn't vote for more taxes. I voted for less regulation in government, personal responsibility, those kind of bills. And so I'm the type that wants to keep government out of our lives, just to the necessities that we have to have, like transportation, education, and infrastructure, those sort of things. But they do a very good job as far as actual bills. So depending on how you feel on education and Common Core, which we supposedly have gotten rid of, but you could go in and look at these bills that we passed in education to see how legislators actually voted. And usually if they vote to increase spending and we're not seeing the results that we want, that's the kind of thing that would get a lower tally. And you would be ranked out of 100 points. And typically the Democrats rank around the 20s to 30s on scoring. And anyone who's a true conservative, they're going to be up in the 90s. So that's a really good way to look at it. Theirs are more on economic issues, not necessarily social issues. And goes the same for the American Conservative Union.
Okay.
But I'm sorry, Pam, but one thing I do want to add, we are going to be looking at how the legislators vote based on resolutions. We will be having our winter meeting January 6th and 7th up in Boise at the Riverside Inn. Who comes to this, it will be every county's 4 Central Committee members, which would be the chair, the state committee man, the state committee woman, and the youth committee person. Those 4 people from all 44 counties and all of the legislative district chair positions will come up to the Riverside, and we will look at resolutions. So like a resolution to make sure we never bring ranked choice voting into this state will probably pass, because that is bad. It's a bad idea. It will make sure we never have another conservative legislator voted in again. So these kind of resolutions come forward as far as ESG, as far as critical race theory, CRT. When we start looking at some of these issues, if the resolutions go through the following Monday, after that weekend of these resolutions and rule proposals, I will meet with the legislators and I will let them know what the people of Idaho expect to see heard in committee, heard on the floor, going over to the other chamber, and winding up on the governor's desk. So if it's grocery sales tax exemption, that one of the resolutions are, I as the chair will make sure that the legislators know that's what the people want. If they want grocery sales tax gone, it needs to be gone.
Okay. So for that convention, if I've tagged it correctly, you said it's in January, it's in Boise, and can Joe and Jane Citizen attend? I realize there might be a cost to that, but is that something that would be acceptable?
Yes, as long as the Republicans, we don't let Democrats come in and see what we're up to. As long as they're registered Republicans, if they're precinct committee people, it's even better. But yes, people can come in and observe to see how the process works. My cost to get into this convention will be $25. My predecessor was charging $150 for the Twin Falls meeting. It was very cost prohibitive for some of the folks. And one thing I've promised when I took that gavel, we will never make it to where good Republicans can't attend these meetings because they couldn't afford it. So my promise when I took that gavel, I will never charge more than $25 for any entry into any meeting.
Thank you. I want to talk about your top 3 priorities. You are trusted and acknowledged to be well-versed in your platform. And what we're all grateful for is that you, in fact, have a platform that is highly defined. So what are your top 3 priorities?
Well, one is definitely education choice, or as I like your terminology, education freedom, and I think we definitely need to go that route. Last year, I brought a bill forward which would allow education savings accounts for families if they weren't happy with their child's progress in a public school or whatever school setting they were in, they could move them to a different school setting, and that would have allowed $5,500 to go toward each kid's education. So that would have been where you take your bill from a private school or from a group home setting or what have you for curriculum and books. You could submit those bills and get them refunded under the kid's name with their own educational savings account. However, that bill failed. The chairman in the education committee, Lance Clow, that was held up on a split vote, and he didn't break the tie in my favor, but he is going to bring that bill forward again with Ron Mendive, and he's from up north. So Ron Mendive was a homeschooling parent, and so he's very, very familiar with school choice issues. So I see no reason in the world why we cannot get a school choice bill through this year, because too many people want to have an alternate form type of education for their child, and they should have that opportunity and not have to be paying twice through taxes, once for public schools and then to pay for a private school or setting again. My second issue would be election integrity. And I did run for Secretary of State, so this is a really big issue. And we do have folks who are very concerned about the absentee ballots, the number of them. I don't know if everybody remembers who's listening, but when you used to get an absentee ballot, you would have to have an affidavit notarized that you're going to be in the military and overseas, or you're going to be with a sick parent down south in Texas or something. But you had to have a pretty good reason to be given an absentee ballot. But now they print them up regularly and often. And what we have are a lot of people who are dependent on it. And with absentee ballots, there's a fear of people who have been registered and not voting to actually receive ballots when they weren't requested by them, but somebody who can track their voting behavior. So it's a little complex, but it's definitely, anybody who's seen that 2,000 Mules, how accumulations of absentee ballots, and all of a sudden you have large groups of them coming in, it doesn't bode well for some candidates. So we need to look at some of those issues. I know that ranked choice voting is something we do not want. And there are many election integrity issues, including voter ID. And that was one of the parts of a bill I brought last year for election integrity. And it would make sure that you had a state government issued ID, either driver's license or the ID without the driving privileges. And I couldn't get that one through either. It's amazing. Anyway, any election integrity bill, I'm sure we're going to have quite a few of them. And also the drop boxes are very controversial as well for absentee ballots.
Okay.
Oh,
So
and third item, I did give you a third item. I'm sorry, but another item, of course, is our personal freedoms. We know that with COVID, people were put in a bad situation of whether they were essential workers or non-essential workers. We had an emergency order put on a state almost right out of the gate, and then one of the last states to remove it 700 plus days later. And a lot of people were impacted financially. A lot of kids suffered because for 2 years they were doing half-day school, half in, half out. or this had some sort of hybrid that may not have worked that well for them. So we have kids who've lost a lot of education over the past 2 years because it wasn't monitored as it typically is. So
Right.
as far as our personal freedoms, as far as our liberty to be able to do what we want to do and live in peace and have happy lives without infringement by the federal or state government, I think is critical to who we are as Idahoans.
Okay. Let's go to something a little bit more controversial that deals directly with the election.
Okay.
Used to be Roe v. Wade. It's a thing of the past, and now it's commonly referred to as Dobbs. So we're all educated. How much do you think here in Idaho, with the bill as it's currently structured, please talk about the current bill. How much do you think that's going to impact this election or affect the outcome of this election?
Well, now the trigger bill that was put into effect more or less says that, you can't legally get an abortion in this state, except, with the exception of the threat of, the life of the mother, rape or incest. So that still stands. Now, I think what you might be talking about is that at the summer meeting, there was a rule pushed through that would allow for none of these exemptions, that it would just solely be abolition of abortion. It was not a popular vote, but for those who were at the meeting, they might have remembered that once I received the gavel, Twin Falls and Jerome delegates got up and walked out, trying to break the quorum. A few other folks tried to get up and walk out and break the quorum. They were not successful in doing so, but then the chair of Twin Falls started taking bushes and shrubberies off of the stage. It was actually pretty chaotic. And so
talking about.
I'm sorry.
Drama we were talking about.
Oh, that it was drama. And so I think that got through because everybody may not have understood the complexities of it. So, now that is just something that we will be addressing in the winter meeting. That is not set in stone. As it stands right now in our current law, the exceptions are still in place. So I know a lot of ladies were upset about that and testifying against it at the meeting, but it did wind up going through. But that does not change our current law or status of that bill in Idaho.
Okay. Do you think that voters are in a sour mood to the point where this election is going to be a referendum on the Democrats and the public's just going to vote no, and we'll see this red wave in Idaho?
I think the die is already cast. I think I already know pretty well who's going to win on the state offices. Now, the legislative offices are a little more interesting. We have some good candidates coming in as I go around the state and I hear some of them speak. I'm not sure really where they are at. And it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. But I do know that the Senate definitely needed an overhaul. And I think the voters definitely in the primary booted out a bunch of them. And they booted them out because they weren't letting good legislation get through that we wanted to see get through. Grocery sales tax exemption, a reduction in our gas taxes, in school choice, just even the election integrity bill. We had nothing as far as election integrity went. And after the 2020 election, a lot of issues needed to be addressed. So the fact literally nothing got through because of the Senate was booted, a good portion of them, and they needed to be. So hopefully this new Senate coming in, they will be beholden to the legislators and not to the executive branch.
Okay. I am playing timekeeper as well, but you have some tremendous news on your recent road trip. And if you could just spend 1 or 2 minutes sharing with all of us, I heard it was a lot of fun. You had hundreds and thousands of people come out overall that people just were very surprised by, and it was not expected.
I'm telling you, Pam, and all you ladies with Pushback, Idaho, it was great. So I got up to Coeur d'Alene and I expected about 150 at the First Baptist Church. It was packed, 300 people, and it went really well. And I showed a video of our direction, our new direction with the Idaho GOP. And the event after that, every one of them had double what I expected. And one of the most fun was the one at the old penitentiary here in Boise. And it had well over 300 people. The enthusiasm was just palatable. I mean, you could just feel how excited people were to make sure we don't become a Colorado, that we don't go Democrat. Now, the people that are going to get in are going to get in. But as of November, that's when my real work starts, because I'm going to be watching, I'm going to be making sure that even if they tended in the past to go a certain way on the way they voted, I'm hoping to pull them back. I think the fact that most of these people, in fact, it was stated at the old penitentiary meeting, one of the people who used to work for the Idaho GOP said to a lobbyist, I don't recognize any of these people. You know why? There are refugees from California who want to save this state, and they are motivated.
Okay. And
Yeah,
Dean,
that's good.
all right. Well, I have a colleague, her name is Mia Benedict Miller, and she is ready and waiting to just take a few questions or as many questions as you can tolerate, Dorothy.
Okay.
So I would like to introduce Mia Benedict Miller. Mia.
Yeah, I think you're muted.
All right. While she is figuring that out, I know she will
Okay, I've got it.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you. At the very bottom of your screens is a Q&A tab. Please click on the Q&A tab and put in a question that you might have from Dorothy. I already have a couple, but if I could get some more, I'll be sure to ask her. And she's very open at answering just about anything. We've thrown some things at her. She's always prepared. So please go ahead and enter. Dorothy, the first question I have for you is, with all the growth that has suddenly occurred in Idaho, what are your thoughts or Republican positions on infrastructure and what we should be aware of to do or not do? In our area, we have issues of housing, of how to handle our immigrants that are coming in. And the third one is in water and transportation. Any thoughts in those particular areas?
Well, the housing's horrible. I mean, when the only thing you can get in Twin Falls and you're on a waiting list for $1,400, you know, a month rent, 2-bedroom apartment, I really don't know how the young folks are doing it. They're just not making enough money to pay those kind of rents with utilities. Housing is an issue. But, you know, I've seen it in Cascade. I've seen it in Blaine County. I've seen it in a lot of places, especially the recreational areas that need service workers. You know, fact of the matter is planning and zoning is a good thing, but sometimes it's the heavy hand of planning and zoning can ruin it on bringing in affordable housing. There's a lot of folks who'd like to invest in affordable housing. There's one a large complex going up in the Valley County area that will help, I hope, alleviate the lack of, you know, staffing for a lot of the locations that are now on limited days and service hours or providing services. So people have got to realize they may not want an apartment complex or duplexes near them, but if you want to have folks there to provide services that you need, the planning and zoning, they've got to really relook at some of the regulations, their setbacks, or just how they're going to zone particular areas. So it's a big problem, and it's everywhere. As far as the immigrants go, I know that a lot of folks are not wanting every unapproved immigrant to be coming into the state. the College of Southern Idaho does have a program. There's quite a bit of money involved in bringing the immigrants into our area. And a lot of them do go work for Chobani or some of the other manufacturing outfits in Twin. But if it doesn't work out, that becomes a problem, because then they become they're being backed and supported by state taxpayers. So there's a lot of people who are concerned about that. That it seems that they come in, droves. It could be maybe 100 over one period of time, and then it kind of stops, and then there's another maybe a group that comes into Boise. And I think if there was more transparency, people wouldn't be as upset about it. But because a lot of times people find out after the fact, that's what gets a little ire up. And people just want to know what's going on. They just want to understand what the plans are and how many folks are coming in, because usually it winds up being a lot of the community that might have to support them if they don't make it in the current workforce they were placed in. So again, it's an issue. And we already have refugees from our western states that are coming in. So how many people do we want? Of course, a lot of people are wanting people to leave the state, but that isn't going to happen. It's a beautiful state, and people just love the environment. They love the recreation. They love the beauty. And actually, people are actually pretty nice here too. And then the last one, I'm sorry, I didn't get, what was the water and infrastructure?
Water and power is basically, what is our capacity there? Are we monitoring it? That's what's happening with that. Seems to be there's a lot of out-of-state influence.
Right. And there is. I worked on the Lemhi water basin adjudication up in the Lemhi Basin, Ledore, and we were looking at high water flow water rights. Typically, you cannot get high water flow water rights, but it's something that was negotiated with the ranchers there because of the fact that we need to start monitoring the water as far as like recharging that area up there and how much is actually leaving the state. A lot of water does go out of state, and we need to start using our water before that happens. In fact, I was kind of alarmed when I saw how much water had already been sold off, how many CFS were going down the river in that one basin. That is Idaho water. We own the water. We own the animals. We own things that we should act like they are ours, is my problem. Now, I live east of Stanley. I get all the water I want. I've already got about a foot of snow in my yard. So I'm heading home tomorrow. So water is a huge issue. But one thing, I do have a master's in resource planning, and groundwater is kind of my area. And it is very important. I think the most important is to make sure we put adequate water and recharge our aquifers for those times when we do have drought. And I don't think, they're not addressing, I think, as thoroughly as they need to. Because if we're recharged, we're going to be okay. But if we don't adequately do it, then we're going to have a drought like we kind of have already had last year, a little bit of one.
All right, great. Another question that's come about is pertinent to our area. How do you feel about this whole area of drag queen performances and so forth to underage minors?
Oh my goodness sakes. I was a special ed director when I left teaching Chalice High School. And one thing that really bothered me is when I saw on social media a picture of 4 Downs young ladies, and the Downs girls were having a lot of fun being dressed up, and they were calling each other Trixie and all of this, and they were dressed very provocatively. They were being taken advantage of, and that very much bothered, at least in my mind, the fact these girls were being used. When you're 18, when you're a consenting adult, you can do whatever you want to do. But if you're going to sexualize kids on stage, if you're going to sexualize them in the classroom, if you're going to sexualize them anywhere, I take issue with that. And a lot of people did. I think the drag queen show that was held in front of our Capitol on 9/11 on a Sunday, I don't think that was probably the best choice of days. Of course, people are going to get upset about that fact alone. But also that it was in broad daylight, about 10 or 11 a.m. in the morning, they were going to have kids up performing with the drag queens. no. Usually you'd have to be over 18 to get into a club to see that kind of show or performance. And again, people can do what they want to do, but just leave the kids out of it. Let them be kids.
Okay, next question. From Tim, is there a person within the Idaho GOP that we can contact to coordinate our efforts on legislative issues? We don't want to duplicate effort on bills.
I agree. Good question. That's a real good question. So like these resolutions we have coming in for the winter meeting, some of them, we're probably going to have 4 or 5 that deal with election integrity. So we'll look at them and then we'll put the authors together of both of ones. Let's say if they all deal with identification, we'll let them get together and kind of wordsmith them together and let them both sponsor it, which is great because then you have a couple of people who can present the resolution, maybe take it from a couple of different perspectives. But we do try to align the resolutions on topic. And that way we have a lot more success when you have a consensus already between a few of the counties or legislative districts. So, and even with other bills that come up, I had an election integrity bill that I brought forward, and Mary Souza, both of us, we both wound up running for Secretary of State. She had one in the Senate as well. Yeah. Actually, by the time you reworked all the bills and moved all some of the sections around, they were very similar. And, I wish we were able to get together on that and run them through. And I did ask her to, but sometimes people, when it comes to a bill, they want their name on it. And that's a little bit unfortunate because sometimes let's just get it done and not worry about who gets the credit. So I've always been for working together to get bills through on both sides of the chambers. But yeah, Tim, I agree with you. We need to make sure that we streamline those so there's not a lot of confusion, especially with a big group of new legislators coming into the legislature.
Okay, great. Here's another one, an anonymous one. How are the central committees going to play an important part in the Idaho GOP? And you might just give a really quick description for people who don't know what a central committee is.
Okay, 44 counties in this state, they have a central committee which consists of a chair, state committee man, state committee woman, and youth committee person. Now, these people are all put in office after the primary. When you look at your ballot, at the bottom, very last thing you vote on is a precinct committee position. This person represents the precincts, voting precincts in your area, and then they go to the first meeting in May after the primary election, and they organize their committee. So the people who are voted in the precinct committee folks, they make nominations for chair, they second it, they vote on it. If there's multiple names that are put forward, and then that's how they create their committee. So in the summer meeting where I was elected, all of the PCs, the ones who represent the grassroots of this state, they're the ones who voted me in. So I am thrilled about that. The winter meeting will be the 4 people that I've mentioned that represent each county. However, an officer, the chair or national committee man, woman, or youth person can be a PC. So the counties are very important, but what's more important is that they are following the rules when they are created. They go exactly as their bylaws state. They don't deviate, and they make sure that it's all fair and above board. Problem is, we've had some problems with that around the state, but everybody needs to have equal footing when they walk into that room with an opportunity to participate in the party, because everybody brings value. It shouldn't always be, sometimes the same old people are there, but when new people move in the area, it'd really be nice to get some new opinions and ideas inside of the party.
I'll give you a little second one on that, because there's one that kind of ties in as to how do we ensure that as the central committees are looking for people to run for office, how do we ensure that we're getting really quality people running for office that we can stand behind?
Business owners are good. A lot of people know if a business owner has integrity and they treat people fairly in the community. Those are the kind of qualities I look for, that they're they are there for the community. They are there for the people. So a lot of the community members, I know there's pastors who have been in their central committees. There's teachers. We have a teacher, one from Mackey, who's in the Custer County group. So a lot of different backgrounds. One, Carrie Hanks, was a bus driver down there from Southeast Idaho, but she was very concerned because she was also tied to education, about what was going on in education. So anybody can get involved. And, you know, if they can rationally think through a lot of things, you know, that you might have been involved with them in one manner or another, and think, you know, they've got a pretty good head on their shoulders. This is the kind of person we need, you know, to help us get represented in the legislature by pushing our ideas through that chamber.
Okay, great. Citizens, I've got something from Kathy. Citizens are concerned about the reliability of election machines. Our clerk is unwilling to allow for a hand count of the ballots and says we're not allowed to touch the ballots. What can be done to encourage clerks to allow this step towards transparency in our elections?
Good question. Okay, we just passed a law last year that allows the Secretary of State to audit counties now. So if you remember last year, a question about auditing came up from Mike Lindell, and the Secretary of State's office went into the least populated counties. Butte County was one of them. It probably took about a half day just to go through and hand count those ballots, if even that. But what this will do is force an audit. They will put the names in literally in a bucket, and they're going to draw them out in those 3 counties. So if it's Kootenai County, if it's Bonneville County, if it's Blaine County, they will be audited. So a hand count will be performed against the ballots, against the spoiled ballots, and everything else that's involved. So anyway, that is going to happen. However, a lot of folks do want to get away from the machines. There's still, some people still feel they can be compromised. And I've been to a couple of sessions with the ES&S machines that are primarily used in this state. And, you know, the biggest issue is that we make sure that you do some test runs, that the numbers that go through in the beginning and go throughout out of the machine. And then what you do is go and do a hand count with sections, you know, portions of those that have already been run through at different times of the day. And then just verify that those came out the same as what the machine said. I mean, to me, that would be something that could come forward as a bill. So now, you know, we've got 3 counties that will be audited. And this is something where we can talk about the procedures with the machines and verifying with temporary, you know, smaller counts throughout the day on election day.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you update us on the status of voter outreach of the party to Hispanic communities, particularly in communities with high Hispanic populations?
Oh, these are great questions. Okay, so I do have somebody who I'm working with in our party, Idaho GOP party, and this person is fluent, and we've got a mailer that we're getting ready to put out to make sure that we have their involvement. They do pay taxes, they do live here, and from what I understand, a lot of them don't vote. Even when I ran for my statewide office, I had mailers with Spanish on one side and English on the other side when I was actually traveling through southern Idaho because of the agricultural community there. And again, these people are hardworking, and they suffer the same as everybody else on taxes, property, and food, and gas. So yes, we are encouraging them to vote. Without a doubt. I know that when I was also out campaigning, we had an event where we had a large population of Hispanics come and talk, and it was a fantastic event, and most of them are pastors at churches, and we're excited. I think they want to save our state just as much as we do.
Great. Here's an interesting question. This is from Mike. What is the party's recourse if a Republican, and he puts that in quotes, legislator refuses to follow or support the party platform?
I love that question.
Didn't you love that question? Thanks, Mike.
I do, Mike. Let's go get him, Mike. If they need to follow the platform, I'm going to call them out on it. That's what I mean by after November. I think we already know who most of the candidates that will be in office. And in January, February, and March, I will be watching how they vote. And if we get a bill to the governor's desk that says we want grocery sales tax exemption and it's vetoed, I'm going to have to call them out on it. So these are the kind of things that I think the grassroots have got to get involved in. Just like on the drag queen example, when we had those kids out there, thousands of people around the state started calling the sponsors of that drag queen show. Just as if we have a legislator or the executive branch decides that they're going to do something contrary to our platform, they will be called out. I'm not afraid to do that. And that will happen, just as these legislators who have R's behind their name came out and started supporting Democrat candidates. I have gone after them 3 times in my press releases. This is unacceptable. And if these Republicans who just endorsed statewide candidates who are Democrats, they will not be running as a Republican 2 years from now. That is wrong. If they're going to support Democrat policies and rules and laws that they want to get passed.